The rope cut deep into Nora Lewis's raw wrists as she strained against her bindings, the smell of burning sage and desert dust filling her nostrils while angry voices debated her fate outside the weather-beaten barn. It was 1885 in the unforgiving territory of New Mexico, and she had just made her third escape attempt from the Hollister Gang men who had abducted her not for ransom, but for something far worse. Nora had been traveling by stagecoach from St. Louis to Santa Fe to take up a teaching position when the gang attacked, killing the driver and taking her captive. For 3 days, she'd endured their lewd remarks and threats, keeping her wits about her while looking for any opportunity to flee. Each attempt had earned her harsher treatment, and now, with her hands bound behind her back and ankles tied together, they'd left her alone in the barn while deciding what to do with a woman who clearly wouldn't submit. Through a gap in the weathered planks, Nora could see the orange glow of their campfire and the silhouettes of men passing bottles of whiskey. Her mouth was parched, her honey-brown hair falling in tangled waves around her shoulders. At 22, she had always prided herself on her independence, but now she wondered if her stubborn streak would cost her life. A soft, scraping sound behind her made Nora freeze. She twisted her head, struggling to see in the darkness. A shadow moved among the hay bales, and her heart hammered wildly against her ribs. "Stay quiet if you want to live," a man's voice whispered, low and urgent. Nora flinched when she felt calloused fingers brush against her wrists, followed by the cool bite of a knife blade sliding between her skin and the ropes. 3 quick sawing motions, and her hands were free. She bit back a cry as blood rushed painfully back into her fingers. "Can you stand?" The stranger was already working on the ropes at her ankles. When the final binding fell away, Nora turned to face her rescuer. In the dim light filtering through the cracks in the barn, she made out a tall figure in a worn leather vest and a bandana covering the lower half of his face. A cowboy hat sat low over his eyes and a revolver was holstered at his hip. "Who are you?" she whispered, massaging her wrists. "Name's Ryder Sullivan." He pulled down the bandana, revealing a strong jaw with several days' worth of stubble. "I've been tracking Hollister's bunch for weeks. Didn't know they had a prisoner until I saw them drag you in here." Nora swallowed hard. "They killed everyone else on the stagecoach." Ryder nodded grimly. "Figured as much. Those bastards don't leave witnesses." He glanced toward the barn door. "We've got about 2 minutes before they check on you again. There's a horse waiting out back." "Where will we go?" Nora asked, already pushing herself to her feet despite the painful tingling in her legs. Ryder's eyes, blue as a desert spring, locked onto hers. "Don't matter right now. All that matters is getting away." He offered her his hand. "Run with me." In that moment, with danger just outside and a stranger offering salvation, Nora made a choice that would forever alter the course of her life. She placed her hand in his, feeling the strength and warmth of his grip. "Lead the way, Mr. Sullivan." Ryder led her to the back of the barn where loose boards created a gap just wide enough to squeeze through. Outside, tethered to a juniper tree, stood a magnificent paint horse, its coat glowing silver and black in the moonlight. "This is Phantom," Ryder whispered, untying the reins. "Best horse in the territory. He'll carry us both." He helped Nora mount first, then swung up behind her in one fluid motion. The warmth of his chest against her back sent an unexpected flutter through her despite their dire circumstances. "Hold tight," he murmured, his breath tickling her ear. They had barely cleared the copse of trees when shouts erupted from the barn. Lanterns blazed to life as Hollister's men discovered their prisoner missing. "Ride," Nora urged, and Phantom surged forward as if understanding the danger. Ryder guided the horse expertly through the scrubby terrain, keeping to the shadows where possible. Behind them, more shouting followed by the thunderous sound of horses being mounted. "They're coming after us," Nora said, her voice tight with fear. "Let them try," Ryder replied, a grim determination in his voice as he urged Phantom to greater speed. They rode hard through the night, the terrain gradually changing from flat plains to rocky foothills. Ryder seemed to know exactly where he was going, guiding them through narrow passages and dry creek beds that would be difficult for pursuers to follow. Dawn was breaking when they finally stopped beside a small spring hidden among a cluster of boulders. Phantom drank thirstily while Ryder helped Nora dismount, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. "You did well," he said, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "Most city women would have been complaining hours ago." Nora raised an eyebrow. "I'm not most women, Mr. Sullivan. And I'd rather ride until my legs fall off than go back to those animals." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair enough, and it's just Ryder." He produced a canteen from his saddlebag and offered it to her. Nora drank gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. "Where are we?" she asked when she'd had her fill. "About 20 miles northeast of Placitas," Ryder replied, scanning the horizon. "There's an old trapper's cabin another few miles up. We can rest there while I figure out our next move." "Our next move," Nora echoed. "You've done enough already." "I won't impose on you further." Ryder's expression hardened. "Hollister's boys won't stop looking. They don't take kindly to folks who cross them, and now we both have. Trust me, Miss Lewis, you're safer with me than on your own." "How do you know my name?" Nora asked sharply. "Overheard them talking about the schoolteacher they nabbed. Said your name more than once." He paused, then added more gently, "I know you've got no reason to trust me, but I give you my word I mean you no harm." Nora studied him. In the growing light, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 28 or 30. His face was tanned and weathered from years under the sun, but handsome in a rugged way, with those striking blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Why help me?" she asked finally. "You could have just gone after Hollister without risking yourself for a stranger." Ryder looked away, a shadow crossing his features. "Let's just say I've got personal reasons for wanting to see Hollister swing. Finding you was unexpected." He adjusted his hat and turned back to her. "Can you ride a bit longer?" Nora nodded, recognizing that he'd deflected her question. "Yes, I can manage." They mounted again, riding at a more moderate pace now that immediate danger had passed. The landscape was beautiful in the morning light, red rock formations rising majestically against a backdrop of distant mountains, scrubby juniper and pinyon pines dotting the terrain. Under different circumstances, Nora might have appreciated the wild beauty. The trapper's cabin appeared around midday, a small, sturdy structure nestled in a grove of cottonwoods beside a narrow creek. It looked abandoned but intact, with a stone chimney and a small corral for livestock. "Home sweet home," Ryder said as he helped Nora dismount. "At least for a day or two." Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A table and chair, a stone fireplace, and a narrow cot were the only furnishings. Ryder moved around with familiar ease, suggesting he'd been there before. "You can take the cot," he said, setting down his saddlebags. "I'll manage with the floor." Nora shook her head. "I won't put you out of a bed. The floor is fine for me." Ryder gave her an amused look. "Stubborn, aren't you? We'll figure it out later. Right now, I'm guessing you'd like to clean up." He rummaged in his pack and produced a small bar of soap and a clean bandana. "Creek's cold but clear. I'll give you privacy." Touched by his consideration, Nora accepted the items. "Thank you." While Ryder tended to Phantom, Nora made her way to the creek. The cold water was shocking but wonderful against her skin. She washed away days of dust, fear, and the lingering touch of her captor's hands. Her wrists were raw and bruised from the ropes, but the cool water soothed the pain. Afterward, feeling somewhat refreshed despite her filthy dress, she returned to find Ryder had started a small fire in the fireplace and was cooking something that smelled surprisingly good. "Hope you like rabbit stew," he said, stirring a small pot. "It's not fancy, but it'll keep our strength up." "It smells wonderful," Nora replied honestly. She hadn't eaten properly in days. They ate in companionable silence, the stew simple but flavorful with wild herbs. When they'd finished, Nora helped clean the few utensils, then settled on a stool near the fire. "You mentioned personal reasons for going after Hollister," she said carefully. "I'd like to understand who I'm traveling with." Ryder stared into the flames for a long moment before answering. 3 years ago, Hollister and his gang raided a small settlement near Socorro. They killed 6 people, including my brother and his wife. His voice remained steady, but Nora could hear the grief beneath it. "Their boy, my nephew Jamie, survived by hiding in a root cellar. He lives with my parents now in Colorado." "I'm sorry," Nora said softly. "The territorial marshals never caught them, said there wasn't enough evidence." Ryder's jaw tightened. "So I've been tracking them myself, learning their patterns. I was close to making my move when they grabbed you. And now you've risked your chance at justice by helping me," Nora realized. Ryder shrugged. "Maybe, but I couldn't leave you there." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "What about you? What brought a schoolteacher all the way from St. Louis to these parts?" Nora wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire. "A fresh start. My father died last winter and there wasn't much left for me in St. Louis. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher needed in Santa Fe, it seemed like fate." She gave a bitter laugh. "Some fate. The school will likely hold the position when they learn what happened," Ryder offered. "Perhaps. If we make it there." She hesitated, then asked, "What happens now? After we rest? We need supplies, information, and safer transport than just Phantom carrying double. Placitas is too risky. Hollister has friends there. But there's a small settlement about a day's ride west where we might find help." Nora nodded, fatigue suddenly overwhelming her. Despite her earlier protests, when Ryder insisted again that she take the cot, she didn't argue. She was asleep almost before her head touched the rough pillow. She woke to darkness and the sound of rain pattering on the roof. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, but then she remembered the escape, Ryder, the cabin. A small lantern burned low on the table, casting just enough light for her to make out Ryder's form on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, his saddle as a pillow. Nora watched him for a moment, this stranger who had risked everything to save her. In sleep, the hard lines of his face softened, making him look younger. What kind of man, she wondered, would pursue vengeance for 3 years, yet show such gentleness to a woman he didn't know? As if sensing her gaze, Ryder's eyes opened. He was instantly alert, hand moving to the revolver beside him before he registered it was just Nora watching him. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. "Yes," she whispered, "just woke and was making sure this was real." He sat up, pushing his hair back from his face. "It's real enough. Rain's a blessing, though, will help cover our tracks." A sudden clap of thunder made Nora jump. Ryder noticed and offered a reassuring smile. "Just a summer storm. They pass quickly out here." "In St. Louis, I used to love thunderstorms," Nora said, drawing her knees up to her chest. "My father and I would sit on the porch and watch the lightning." "You miss him," Ryder observed. Nora nodded, surprised at how easily the words came. "Every day. He was a professor of literature. Taught me everything I know. After my mother died when I was 8, it was just the 2 of us." She paused, memories washing over her. "He would have liked this adventure, I think. He always said I needed to see more of the world than just Missouri. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Nora smiled sadly. What about your parents? You mentioned they're in Colorado. They have a small ranch near Denver. Good people. Simple, hardworking. Ryder leaned back against the wall. They wanted me to stay, help with the ranch, especially after we lost my brother. But I couldn't just let it go. And when you find Hollister, what then? Ryder was quiet for so long that Nora thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, honestly, I don't know. For 3 years, that's all I've thought about. Haven't considered much beyond that point. The rain continued, a soothing rhythm on the roof. Neither seemed inclined to go back to sleep, so they talked through the night about Nora's dreams of teaching in the West, about Ryder's life as a cowhand before turning bounty hunter, about books they'd read and places they hoped to see. By the time dawn broke, the rain had stopped, and Nora realized with surprise that she felt more at ease with this man she'd known for barely a day than she had with anyone since her father died. We should get moving, Ryder said, standing and stretching. If the rain stopped, Hollister's men will be back on our trail. They ate a quick breakfast of hardtack and jerky, then prepared to leave. Outside, the world was fresh and clean from the rain, the desert plants giving off a pungent, earthy aroma. Ryder helped Nora mount Phantom, then swung up behind her. She was acutely aware of his arms around her as he took the reins, his chest solid against her back. Ready? He asked. Nora nodded, and they set off into the bright morning, uncertain what lay ahead, but somehow less afraid than she'd been the day before. They rode steadily through the day, the landscape gradually changing as they headed west. The terrain became more rugged, with dramatic red rock formations rising from the desert floor. Ryder kept them off the main trails, following game paths and dry washes that would be difficult to track. By late afternoon, they came upon a small settlement nestled in a valley, just a handful of buildings, including a general store, a blacksmith shop, and what appeared to be a saloon. Cimarron Springs, Ryder told her as they paused on a ridge overlooking the settlement. Not much to look at, but the people here mind their own business. Hollister's influence doesn't reach this far. Will we find help here? Nora asked, studying the dusty collection of buildings. I know someone, old trapper named Elijah who runs the trading post. He owes me a favor. Ryder adjusted his hat. Let's hope he's feeling generous. They approached cautiously, Ryder alert for any sign of danger. The few people visible on the single street paid them little attention: a woman hanging laundry, a man repairing a wagon wheel, 2 children chasing a dog. Ryder led them to a weathered wooden building with trading post painted in faded letters above the door. He dismounted and helped Nora down, then tied Phantom to a hitching post. Stay close, he murmured as they entered the dimly lit store. The interior was crowded with merchandise, barrels of flour and sugar, shelves of canned goods, tools, clothing, and sundry items hanging from the rafters. Behind a rough-hewn counter stood a lean, white-bearded man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Well, well, the old man said, his voice like gravel, if it ain't Ryder Sullivan, thought you might be dead by now. Not yet, Elijah, Ryder replied with a slight smile, though not for lack of trying on some folks' part. The old man's gaze shifted to Nora, taking in her travel-worn appearance and the marks on her wrists. And who might this young lady be? Miss Nora Lewis, Ryder said. She's had some trouble, we both have. Elijah nodded slowly. Hollister's bunch, Ryder's eyebrows raised in surprise. How'd you know? They came through here 2 days ago asking questions. Didn't like the answers they got. Elijah spat into a brass spittoon. Never did care for that lot. What do you need? Supplies, a second horse if you've got one, and information. Anybody else been asking after us? Elijah shook his head. Not yet, but word travels. You aiming to get the lady somewhere safe. Santa Fe, eventually, Ryder answered. She has a teaching position waiting. The old man grunted. Might be safer to head north for a spell. I hear Hollister's got friends in Santa Fe these days, some politician who protects him in exchange for services rendered. Nora felt her heart sink. Her job, her fresh start all now seemed impossibly out of reach. Elijah must have read her expression. Don't fret, miss. Things have a way of working out, especially with this one watching your back. He jerked his thumb at Ryder. Stubborn as they come, but straight as an arrow. We need a place to stay tonight, Ryder said. Somewhere quiet. There's a room above the store, nothing fancy, but it's clean. On the house. Elijah held up a hand when Ryder started to protest. Consider it payment for that business in Denver. Now, let me get you folks some supplies. While Elijah gathered what they needed, Nora wandered the store, fingering a bolt of calico fabric and examining a shelf of books with longing. It had been days since she'd been able to read, and the familiar sight of bound volumes provided an unexpected comfort. See something you like? Ryder asked, coming to stand beside her. Just missing my books. I had to leave most of them behind in St. Louis, but I'd packed a few favorites for the journey. They were in my trunk on the stagecoach. Ryder picked up a volume of Whitman's Leaves of Grass and handed it to her. Take it. Consider it a welcome to the West gift. Nora's eyes widened. I couldn't possibly. You can and you will, Elijah called from across the store. That's been sitting on my shelf for 3 years. Nobody around here has much use for poetry. Touched, Nora clutched the book to her chest. Thank you, both of you. With supplies purchased, including a sturdy mare for Nora to ride, they followed Elijah to the back of the store and up a narrow staircase. The room above was simple but, as promised, clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a small table with 2 chairs. There's a bathhouse out back, Elijah told them. I'll have Mabel bring up some hot water and something to eat. He fixed Ryder with a stern look. And you'd best get some rest. You look like you've been rode hard and put up wet. After Elijah left, an awkward silence fell between them. There was only one bed, and while they'd shared the cabin the night before, this felt different somehow. I'll sleep on the floor, Ryder said, anticipating her concern. There's no need to be uncomfortable, Nora replied. The bed is large enough. We can maintain propriety. Ryder looked surprised but nodded. If you're sure. When Mabel, Elijah's round-faced, cheerful wife, brought up a tub of steaming water, soap, and clean towels, Ryder excused himself to check on the horses, giving Nora privacy to bathe. The hot water was blissful after days of dirt and fear. Mabel had also brought a simple dress that was a bit too large but clean and whole. By the time Ryder returned, Nora was dressed, her damp hair braided, feeling almost human again. He stopped short in the doorway, something like admiration crossing his features before he mastered his expression. Elijah says we should be safe here tonight, but we'll leave at first light. Hollister's men have been seen 20 miles east. They ate the stew Mabel had provided, savoring real food and the momentary safety. As darkness fell, the events of the past few days caught up with Nora, exhaustion making her eyelids heavy. You should sleep, Ryder said gently. Tomorrow will be another long day. Nora nodded, too tired to argue. They arranged themselves awkwardly on opposite sides of the bed, both fully clothed except for their boots, a respectful space between them. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Nora. She lay awake, listening to Ryder's breathing, wondering at the strange twist of fate that had brought her here, running for her life with a man she barely knew, yet somehow trusted completely. Ryder, she whispered into the darkness. Are you awake? Yes, came his soft reply. Thank you. For saving me, for risking everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." There was a long pause before he answered. "You don't owe me anything, Nora." The way he said her name, soft and warm, sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. She turned her head to look at him in the dim moonlight filtering through the small window. He was watching her, his blue eyes serious. "Why did you really help me?" she asked. "The truth." Ryder sighed, rolling onto his back to stare at the ceiling. "When I saw you there, bound and still fighting, it reminded me there are things worth protecting in this world, not just vengeance to pursue." He turned to face her again. "I've been so focused on finding Hollister that I forgot why I started hunting him in the first place, because he hurt people who didn't deserve it. Helping you felt right." His honesty disarmed her. "I'm glad you found me when you did." "So am I," he replied softly. Something shifted between them in that moment, a connection formed by shared danger and growing trust. Nora wasn't sure what to call it, but it warmed her from within, chasing away some of the fear that had been her constant companion for days. They fell silent, and eventually Nora drifted into the deepest, most peaceful sleep she'd had since the stagecoach attack. Morning came too soon, the first rays of sunlight streaming through the window. Nora woke to find herself alone in the bed, the space where Ryder had been already cool. Panic flared briefly until she heard voices downstairs, Ryder and Elijah, talking in low, urgent tones. She dressed quickly and made her way down to find the two men hunched over a map spread on the store counter. They looked up as she approached, and Nora immediately sensed something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked. Ryder and Elijah exchanged glances. "Ryder came in this morning," Elijah explained. "Hollister's put out a bounty, $500 for information on your whereabouts." Nora felt the blood drain from her face. Why would he go to such lengths for one escaped prisoner? "It's not just you he wants," Ryder said grimly. "It's both of us, and the bounty on me is 1,000. But why? Because I've been tracking him for years, gathering evidence, and because I know things about his operation that could hang him." Ryder folded the map decisively. "We need to change our plan. Heading straight to Santa Fe is too risky now." "Where will we go?" Nora asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear churning inside her. "North," like Elijah suggested. "There's a place in the mountains where we can lie low until things cool down. A friend's hunting cabin that no one knows about." Elijah nodded approval. "Smart. Take the high trail past Chimney Rock. It's rough going but hard to follow." They prepared to leave immediately. Elijah provided additional supplies, including ammunition for Ryder's revolver and a small derringer that he pressed into Nora's hands. "Just in case," the old man said. "Ever fired one before?" "My father taught me," Nora replied, checking the mechanism with practiced ease that surprised both men. He believed women should know how to protect themselves. Ryder's lips quirked in a half-smile. "You're full of surprises, Miss Lewis." They said their goodbyes to Elijah and Mabel, mounting their horses as the sun cleared the eastern hills. The mare provided for Nora, a sturdy buckskin named Sunny, was gentle but sure-footed. And Nora was grateful not to be riding double anymore, though she found herself oddly missing the security of Ryder's arms around her. They rode north, following game trails and staying under the cover of trees when possible. Ryder kept them moving at a steady pace, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain around them. By midday, they had left the desert behind and were climbing into pine-covered foothills. "How far is this cabin?" Nora asked during a brief rest to water the horses at a small stream. 2 days, maybe 3 if we're careful," Ryder replied, refilling their canteens. "It belongs to a man I once rode with, Sam Blackwood. Good man, died in a mining accident last year. His family's back east and doesn't know about the place." And you're certain no one else knows of it? As certain as I can be. Sam valued his privacy, only showed me because we were caught in a blizzard once needed shelter. They continued their journey, the terrain growing steeper and more challenging. By late afternoon, dark clouds were gathering over the distant peaks, and a cool wind had picked up. Storm coming, Ryder observed. We need to find shelter before it hits. They pushed on, following a narrow ridge that offered spectacular views of the valley below. Nora, despite their precarious situation, found herself awed by the wild beauty surrounding them: towering pines, dramatic rock formations, and wildflowers carpeting meadows in vibrant hues. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Ryder glanced back at her. "Different from St. Louis, I expect. Very, but wonderful in its own way." She smiled. "I understand now why people fall in love with this land despite its harshness." Something in Ryder's expression softened. "It gets in your blood." The freedom of it. The first fat raindrops began to fall as they descended into a sheltered valley. Ahead, tucked among a stand of aspens, Ryder spotted what they needed: a shallow cave in the rock face, just deep enough to provide shelter from the coming storm. They led the horses inside just as the sky opened up, rain falling in sheets. The cave was dry and surprisingly cozy, with room enough for them and the horses. Ryder quickly gathered what dry wood he could find and started a small fire near the entrance, where the smoke could escape. "Good timing," Nora said, spreading her bedroll on the cave floor. "Another few minutes and we would have been soaked through." Ryder nodded, arranging their supplies. Hungry, they shared a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and dried apples, listening to the rain pound outside. The temperature had dropped with the storm, and Nora found herself edging closer to the fire. "Here," Ryder said, shrugging out of his coat and draping it around her shoulders. The garment was warm from his body and carried his scent: leather, pine, and something uniquely him. "Thank you," she murmured, pulling it closer. Ryder sat beside her, feeding small sticks to the fire. In the dancing light, his features were softer, less guarded than usual. "Tell me more about your teaching," he said. "What made you choose that path?" Nora smiled, warming to the subject. "I've always loved learning and sharing that with others. My father's influence, I suppose. He could make even the driest subject fascinating." She poked at the fire with a stick. "There's something magical about watching someone grasp a new idea, seeing that moment of understanding dawn. I wanted to bring that to children who might not otherwise have the opportunity." "Noble cause," Ryder commented. "What about you? Was bounty hunting always your plan?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. Before my brother was killed, I worked cattle mostly, was saving to buy my own spread someday." His expression grew distant. "Still think about it sometimes. A little ranch, good horses, maybe a few cattle, somewhere quiet." "That sounds lovely," Nora said softly. "Do you think you'll ever go back to that dream?" Ryder stared into the flames. "Don't know. Vengeance has a way of hollowing a man out, not sure what would be left afterward." Impulsively, Nora reached out and covered his hand with hers. "There would be plenty left, Ryder Sullivan. I've known you only a few days, but I can see you're a man of honor and compassion. Those things don't disappear." He looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. Something passed between them, a current of understanding and connection that made Nora's breath catch. For a moment she thought he might lean toward her, but then a log shifted in the fire, sending up a shower of sparks, breaking the spell. Ryder cleared his throat and gently withdrew his hand. "We should get some rest. Long day tomorrow." They arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, but sleep was elusive for Nora. She kept thinking about the man lying a few feet away, the enigma that was Ryder Sullivan, a man driven by vengeance yet capable of great kindness. A man who made her feel safe in the midst of danger. A man who, despite all reason and propriety, was beginning to occupy a place in her heart. The storm passed during the night, and they woke to a world washed clean. Sunlight filtered through the trees, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor as they continued their journey northward. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the scent of wet pine and earth. For 3 days they traveled, climbing higher into the mountains, following trails that sometimes seemed to exist only in Ryder's memory. They settled into a comfortable rhythm, riding side by side when the trail allowed, talking easily about everything and nothing, falling silent when necessary, but never awkwardly. Nora learned that Ryder had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed. He told her stories about his days working cattle drives, about the characters he'd met on the frontier, about the best horse he'd ever owned, a Mustang named Diablo, who was as loyal as he was ornery. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in St. Louis, her father's eccentric academic friends, the books that had shaped her thinking. She discovered that Ryder, despite limited formal education, was well-read, having taught himself during long, lonely nights on the trail. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they crested a ridge and Nora gasped at the view. Below them lay a pristine alpine meadow carpeted with wildflowers, a crystal-clear stream winding through it. And there, nestled against the tree line, stood a small log cabin with a stone chimney. "Sam's place," Ryder said. "Home, at least for a while." The cabin was rustic but solid, built to withstand harsh mountain winters. Inside, they found a single room containing a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves stocked with basic provisions, and a bed large enough for 1 person, maybe 2 if they were very friendly. "It's not much," Ryder said, watching her expression carefully. "It's perfect," Nora replied sincerely. After days on the trail and the horror of her captivity before that, the simple cabin seemed like luxury. They settled in quickly, falling into a natural division of labor. Ryder checked the perimeter, making sure they had not been followed, while Nora took inventory of the supplies and started a fire in the hearth. By evening, the cabin was warm and surprisingly cozy. The issue of sleeping arrangements arose again, but this time Ryder insisted on making a pallet for himself on the floor near the fire. "You take the bed," he said firmly. "I've slept on worse than a wooden floor." That night, lying in the comfortable bed while Ryder slept a few feet away, Nora found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed in just a week. The teaching position in Santa Fe now seemed like a distant dream, something from another life. Her new reality was this: a cabin in the wilderness with a man who was still largely a mystery to her, but who had risked everything to save her. What would happen when this was over? Would they go their separate ways? The thought brought an unexpected pang of sadness. Days passed, settling into a peaceful routine. They took turns with chores, gathering firewood, fetching water from the stream, preparing simple meals. Ryder taught Nora how to fish in the clear mountain stream, and she surprised him by being a quick study, catching a good-sized trout on her 3rd try. "My father took me fishing on the Mississippi," she explained, watching as Ryder cleaned their catch. "He believed girls should learn the same skills as boys." "Smart man," Ryder commented. "Most fathers I know would rather keep their daughters ignorant and ladylike." "He wanted me to be independent," Nora said, remembering her father's gentle encouragement. "After my mother died, he raised me alone. He knew he wouldn't always be there to protect me." Ryder glanced up at her. "He'd be proud of how you've handled yourself. Most women would have broken down by now." His praise warmed her. "What about your parents? What are they like?" "Simple folk. Hard-working. Pa was a blacksmith before he saved enough to buy the ranch. Ma taught school for a spell before they married. He smiled slightly. They wanted more for me and my brother than they had. Education, opportunities. When Daniel decided to try his luck out here, they supported him. When I followed, they understood. And now, what do they think of your pursuit of Hollister? Ryder's expression clouded. They don't know the full extent of it. Think I'm just working as a scout sending money home for Jamie's care. He sighed. They've had enough grief. Don't need to worry about me too. They must miss you, Nora said softly. Suppose they do. He finished cleaning the fish and stood. I miss them too sometimes. That evening, as they shared the fish cooked simply over the fire, Nora noticed Ryder seemed preoccupied, his gaze often drifting to the window. Is something wrong? She asked. He hesitated before answering. Been thinking about our next move. We can't stay here indefinitely. Sooner or later, we need to decide where to go. You mean I need to decide, Nora clarified. Your path was clear before I came along. You were hunting Hollister. That hasn't changed, Ryder said, but the situation has. Hollister's looking for both of us now. Because of me, Nora said, guilt washing over her. I've complicated your mission. Ryder shook his head firmly. This isn't your fault. Hollister and his gang are animals who have hurt too many people. You're just another victim of their cruelty. Not just a victim anymore, Nora countered. Not since you cut those ropes. Their eyes met across the table, understanding passing between them. They'd both changed in the days since that moment in the barn, Nora finding strength she hadn't known she possessed. Ryder perhaps rediscovering parts of himself long buried under grief and vengeance. No, he agreed softly. Not just a victim. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Nora woke to find Ryder already up, a cup of coffee in his hand, staring out the window at the meadow beyond. I've been thinking, he said without preamble when he heard her stir. About Santa Fe. Nora sat up, instantly alert. What about it, your teaching position? It's important to you. He turned to face her. We could try to get word to the school, let them know what happened, see if they'll still have you. Hope flickered in Nora's chest. You think that's possible? Possible, yes. Risky, also, yes. He took a sip of his coffee. But I've never been one to let risk stop me from doing what's right. What are you suggesting? I know someone in Placida's, woman named Maria Gonzalez, runs the telegraph office. She's discreet and no friend to Hollister. We could send a message through her, feel out the situation in Santa Fe. Nora considered this. And if the position is still available, if it's safe to go there, then I'll get you there, Ryder said simply. And Hollister? Your vengeance, a complicated expression crossed his face. Some things are worth putting aside, at least for a time. The selflessness of his offer touched Nora deeply. This man, who had pursued vengeance single-mindedly for 3 years, was willing to delay it for her sake. The realization brought a warmth to her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun streaming through the window. Thank you, she said softly, but I don't want you to abandon your quest because of me. Ryder crossed the room to sit beside her on the edge of the bed. Maybe it's time I remembered there are other things in life besides revenge. He hesitated, then added more quietly, being here with you. It's reminded me of that. The intensity in his blue eyes made Nora's breath catch. They were sitting close, too close for propriety, but she couldn't bring herself to move away. Ryder, she began, not sure what she wanted to say. Before she could continue, a sound from outside made them both freeze, the distant but unmistakable whinny of a horse that was neither phantom nor sunny. Ryder was on his feet instantly, moving to the window with the silent grace of a predator. Nora watched as his body tensed, hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Riders, he said, voice low and tight. 3 of them coming up the trail. Fear shot through Nora. Hollister's men, can't tell yet, but nobody should know about this place. Ryder moved quickly, gathering his rifle and ammunition. "Get your things. We might need to leave in a hurry." Nora scrambled to collect her few possessions, heart pounding. The peaceful interlude they'd enjoyed was shattered, reality crashing back with brutal force. Ryder checked his weapons, movements efficient and practiced. "Stay inside. If things go bad, there's a trapdoor under the rug leading to a root cellar. Sam built it as a hideaway. Get in there and stay quiet. And leave you to face them alone." "I won't do that," Nora protested. Ryder fixed her with a stern look. "This isn't a debate, Nora. I can't protect you and fight them at the same time." Before she could argue further, he moved to the door, positioning himself to see the approaching riders while remaining partially concealed. Minutes ticked by, the silence broken only by the distant sound of hoofbeats growing closer. Nora stood frozen, the small derringer Elijah had given her clutched in her hand. "It's Hollister," Ryder finally said, his voice flat. "And 2 of his men. They've found us." Icy fear gripped Nora's heart. "How? Doesn't matter now." Ryder turned to her, his expression grave. "You need to hide. Now." This time Nora didn't argue. She moved to the rug, pulling it back to reveal the trapdoor Ryder had mentioned. The space below was dark and cramped, but it would conceal her. Before descending, she impulsively reached out and caught Ryder's arm. "Be careful," she whispered. His eyes softened momentarily. "Always am." Then he was helping her into the space, closing the trapdoor above her. Darkness enveloped Nora as she huddled in the confined space, straining to hear what was happening above. Muffled voices reached her riders, calm and steady, and another, louder and harsher, that must belong to Hollister. The words were indistinct, but the threatening tone was unmistakable. Then came the sound she'd been dreading, a gunshot, followed by another. Wood splintered somewhere above her. More shots rang out in quick succession, and something heavy fell, shaking dust from the ceiling of her hiding place. Nora pressed her hands over her mouth to stifle a cry. Was Ryder hurt? Dead? The thought was unbearable. More shouts, another flurry of gunfire. Then silence, heavy and ominous. Footsteps moved across the floor above, slow, deliberate. A voice called out, "Check outside. Make sure no one else is around." Nora held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain whoever was above must hear it. The footsteps moved again, stopping directly over the trapdoor. "Where is she, Sullivan?" Hollister's voice clearer now. "The school teacher. We know she was with you." Ryder's response was too low to make out. Whatever he said provoked a laugh from Hollister. Brave words from a man bleeding on the floor. "Tell me where she is, and maybe I'll let you live long enough to say goodbye." Nora's blood ran cold. Ryder was hurt, perhaps dying, and still protecting her. She couldn't let him sacrifice himself. Her fingers tightened around the derringer. It held only 2 shots, but maybe it would be enough to create a diversion, give Ryder a chance. Before she could act, the trapdoor was suddenly wrenched open, flooding her hiding place with light. Standing above her was a tall, broad-shouldered man with cold eyes and a cruel smile, Hollister himself. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look what we have here. The little schoolmarm hiding like a mouse." Rough hands dragged Nora from the cellar. She fought back, kicking and scratching, but her captor simply laughed and twisted her arm behind her back until she cried out in pain. When her eyes adjusted to the light, she saw Ryder slumped against the far wall, blood staining his shirt from a wound in his shoulder. His face was bruised, but his eyes blazed with fury when he saw how Hollister's man was handling her. "Let her go," he growled. "She's got nothing to do with this." Hollister smirked. "On the contrary, she's got everything to do with this now." He circled Nora, eyeing her like a predator. "You've led us on quite a chase, Miss Lewis. Caused me considerable trouble." "The trouble's just beginning," Nora spat, struggling against her captor's grip. Hollister's hand shot out, striking her across the face. The blow sent her reeling, and she would have fallen if not for the man holding her. "Lay another hand on her and I'll kill you," Ryder said, his voice deadly quiet. Hollister laughed. "Big talk from a dying man." He turned to his henchman. "Tie her up. We're taking her with us." "What about him?" the man asked, nodding toward Ryder. "Leave him. He won't last long with that shoulder. The wolves will finish what we started." Terror seized Nora at the thought of leaving Ryder to die alone. "No, you can't." "I can do whatever I please, Miss Lewis." Hollister's eyes were cold. "You'll learn that soon enough." The second man returned from outside. "Horses are secure. No sign of anyone else. Good. Get her ready to travel." Hollister knelt beside Ryder, who was struggling to remain conscious. "Any last words, Sullivan, for old time's sake?" Ryder's eyes, glazed with pain, found Nora's. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Touching," Hollister mocked, standing. "Let's go." As they dragged her toward the door, Nora fought with renewed desperation. "Ryder," she cried, twisting in her captor's grip. But Ryder's head had fallen forward, his eyes closed. Was he breathing? Nora couldn't tell, and the uncertainty was agony. Outside, the sunlight seemed obscenely bright after the darkness of what had transpired in the cabin. Hollister's men bound Nora's hands cruelly tight, reminding her of her first captivity. The irony wasn't lost on her, once again bound, once again facing an uncertain fate. "Please," she begged as they lifted her onto a horse. "Let me check on him. He might still be alive." "Begging already?" Hollister sneered. "Save your breath, schoolmarm. You'll need it where we're going." They rode away, Nora twisting in the saddle for one last glimpse of the cabin, the place that had briefly been a haven, now turned into a tomb for the man who had risked everything to save her. Grief and rage mingled within her, but beneath them, a steely resolve was forming. Ryder had taught her more than just how to survive in the wilderness. He had shown her courage, determination, the strength to face whatever came. If he was truly gone, she would not let his sacrifice be in vain. Somehow she would escape. Somehow she would make Hollister pay. They rode hard through the day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. Nora's wrists were raw from the ropes, her body aching from the punishing pace. Hollister seemed determined to put as much distance as possible between them and the cabin. By nightfall, they had descended from the mountains and were traveling through rolling hills covered with scrub oak and juniper. When they finally made camp, Nora was nearly unconscious with exhaustion. Hollister's men dragged her from the horse and tied her to a tree, not bothering to offer food or water. They kept their distance, eyeing her with a mixture of wariness and lust that made her skin crawl. "What do you want with me?" she demanded when Hollister approached with a canteen. "Why not just kill me too?" he smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "You're bait, Miss Lewis, and insurance." "Bait for what? Ryder is dead." The words burned her throat like acid. "Perhaps, perhaps not. Sullivan's got more lives than a cat." Hollister uncapped the canteen. "But that's not why you're valuable. You see, I've got a buyer who pays handsomely for educated women like yourself. Seems there's quite a market for school teachers down in Mexico." Horror washed over Nora as his meaning became clear. "You're selling me, like cattle." "Better price than cattle these days," Hollister chuckled, holding the canteen to her lips. "Drink, I need you healthy." Nora turned her head away, refusing the water despite her raging thirst. Hollister shrugged. "Suit yourself, you'll change your mind by tomorrow." He stood, stretching. "Try to rest. We've got a long ride ahead." Left alone, Nora tested her bonds, but they were secure. Her captors had learned from her previous escape attempts. Despair threatened to overwhelm her, but she fought it back, focusing instead on Ryder's last words to her. "I'm sorry," he had said. "Sorry for what?" for failing to protect her, for dying. The memory of his face, pale and bloodied, brought fresh tears to her eyes. Whether he lived or died, Nora knew she owed it to Ryder to survive, to escape if possible. She would not become merchandise in Hollister's sordid trade. With that resolution firm in her mind, she closed her eyes, feigning sleep while her thoughts raced, searching for a plan. Hours passed. The camp grew quiet as Hollister and his men slept, leaving only one guard who sat by the fire, occasionally taking swigs from a flask. Nora watched him through half-closed eyes, waiting. Eventually, the guard's head began to nod, the effects of the alcohol and late hour taking their toll. When his chin finally dropped to his chest, Nora made her move. She had been working at her bonds throughout the night, rubbing them against the rough bark of the tree. Her wrists were bloody, but the ropes had frayed enough that she might with enough force break free. Taking a deep breath, she gave one powerful jerk, ignoring the searing pain as the rope bit into her flesh. Nothing happened. She tried again, putting all her strength behind the effort. This time she felt the rope give slightly. One more try. Gritting her teeth against the pain, Nora pulled with everything she had. The rope snapped, and suddenly her hands were free. Moving silently, she untied her ankles, then surveyed the camp. Hollister and his men were still sleeping. The horses were tethered nearby, including her own mare, Sunny. Nora crept toward the horses, freezing when one of the men stirred. But he merely rolled over and continued snoring. Heart pounding, she reached Sunny and carefully untied her reins. Leading the horse away from the camp as quietly as possible, Nora didn't dare mount until they were out of earshot. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves seemed thunderous in the night stillness. Finally, judging they were far enough away, she swung herself into the saddle and urged Sunny into a gallop. She had no clear plan beyond putting distance between herself and Hollister. But one thought burned in her mind: she had to know if Ryder was alive or dead. Logic told her to ride for the nearest settlement, to seek help. But her heart pulled her back toward the mountain cabin. If there was any chance Ryder had survived, she couldn't abandon him. Dawn was breaking when Nora made her decision. She would return to the cabin. If Ryder was alive, he would need help. If he was dead, well, she would face that reality when the time came. She changed direction, pushing Sunny as hard as she dared on the unfamiliar terrain. The mare was sturdy and willing, seeming to sense the urgency of their mission. By midday, Nora had reached the foothills. She paused to rest Sunny and to get her bearings. The mountains loomed ahead, the trail to the cabin somewhere among them. Ryder had led the way before, and she had paid little attention to landmarks. Now she strained to recall details: a distinctive rock formation, a bend in the stream, anything that might guide her. As she stood there, uncertainty gnawing at her, a sound caught her attention: hoofbeats, approaching fast. Her heart sank. Had Hollister's men caught up to her already? She remounted quickly, urging Sunny toward a thicket of trees that might provide cover. But before she could reach it, a rider burst into view from the opposite direction. Nora's breath caught in her throat. The rider was slumped forward in the saddle, clearly injured, but the horse was unmistakable Phantom, Ryder's paint stallion. And the figure on his back, impossibly, was Ryder himself. "Ryder," she cried, spurring Sunny toward him. He looked up at her voice, his face pale and drawn with pain, but his eyes lighting with disbelief and joy. "Nora!" How, before he could finish, he swayed dangerously in the saddle. Nora reached him just as he began to fall, somehow managing to slow his descent to the ground. "You're alive," she whispered, cradling his head. I thought. "Takes more than Hollister to kill me," Ryder said weakly, attempting a smile that turned into a grimace of pain. But it was a near thing. His shoulder was crudely bandaged with strips torn from his shirt, the fabric stained dark with blood. He was burning with fever, his skin hot to the touch. "We need to get you help," Nora said, examining the wound with gentle fingers. "Hollister?" Ryder asked, his eyes searching hers. "I escaped. Last night." She showed him her raw, bleeding wrists. "They were taking me to Mexico to sell me." Anger flashed in Ryder's eyes, giving him a momentary burst of strength. "We need to move. They'll be looking for you." "You can't ride in this condition," Nora protested. "Don't have a choice." He struggled to sit up. "Help me back on Phantom." Nora wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. They were exposed here, vulnerable. Somehow, she managed to get Ryder back on his horse, though the effort left him gray-faced and sweating. "Where do we go?" she asked, mounting Sonny. Ryder thought for a moment, clearly fighting to stay conscious. "Placida's. Maria's our best bet." It was a risk. Hollister had friends in Placida's, but they needed help, and quickly. Ryder's wound was infected, his strength failing rapidly. They rode cautiously, taking back trails and avoiding the main roads. Ryder drifted in and out of consciousness, staying upright in the saddle only through sheer will. Nora rode beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. By evening, the small settlement of Placida's came into view, a scattered collection of adobe buildings nestled in the foothills. They approached from the east, using a dry wash to conceal their arrival until the last moment. "The telegraph office," Ryder murmured, pointing to a small building on the edge of town. "Maria lives above it." Nora helped him dismount, supporting most of his weight as they staggered to the back door of the building. She knocked softly, praying that Maria was home and alone. The door cracked open, revealing a middle-aged Latina woman with sharp, intelligent eyes that widened in surprise at the sight of them. "Dios mío," she breathed. "Ryder Sullivan, you look like death itself." "Feel like it too," Ryder managed. "We need help, Maria." The woman glanced past them, checking for observers, then opened the door wider. Quickly. Inside. She helped Nora get Ryder up a narrow staircase to a small but tidy apartment above the telegraph office. Together, they lowered him onto a bed where he finally surrendered to unconsciousness. "Hollister's work?" Maria asked, already gathering supplies to treat the wound. Nora nodded, watching anxiously as the woman cut away the makeshift bandage. "He was shot. I thought he was dead. He would be, if not for that hard head of his." Maria examined the wound with practiced hands. "Bullet went through clean, but infection has set in. He needs a doctor." "Is there one in town?" Nora asked hopefully. Maria shook her head. "Not one I'd trust with this. Dr. Fellows drinks too much and talks too freely. If Hollister has men in Placida's, they'd know about Ryder within the hour." She looked up at Nora. "I can treat him, but I'll need your help, and it won't be pretty." "I'll do whatever is necessary," Nora said firmly. The next hours were a nightmare of blood, pain, and fear. Maria cleaned the wound with whiskey, drawing agonized groans from Ryder even in his unconscious state. She packed it with a poultice of herbs whose pungent smell filled the small room, then bound it tightly with clean bandages. Through it all, Nora bathed Ryder's face with cool water, whispered encouragement, and held his hand when the pain made him thrash. By dawn, his fever had broken and he rested more peacefully. Maria, watching Nora's tender ministrations, said quietly, "You care for him." It wasn't a question, but Nora answered anyway. "He saved my life, more than once. That's not what I mean, and you know it." Maria's dark eyes were knowing. Nora looked down at Ryder's face, relaxed now in sleep, the hard lines of pain smoothed away. She thought about their days in the cabin, the connection that had grown between them, the way her heart had shattered when she thought him dead. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I care for him." Maria nodded, satisfied. "Good. He has been alone too long, carrying that darkness inside him. She stood, stretching her tired muscles. You both should rest. I'll bring food later. Left alone with the sleeping Ryder, Nora finally allowed herself to relax slightly. They were safe, at least for the moment. Ryder was alive and, God willing, would recover. She settled in a chair beside the bed, intending to keep watch, but exhaustion overcame her and she soon dozed off. When she woke, the room was filled with afternoon light and Ryder was watching her, his blue eyes clear of fever. "You came back for me," he said, voice rough with thirst. Nora moved to help him drink from a cup of water on the bedside table. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you'd do the sensible thing and run as far from Hollister as possible." He took a careful sip. "Should have known better. You're not exactly sensible, schoolmarm. Is that a complaint?" Nora asked, smiling despite herself. "No," his gaze held hers. "It's the highest compliment I can give." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words. Finally, Ryder asked, "How did you escape?" Nora showed him her wrists, now properly bandaged by Maria. "Much the same way as before. They bound me to a tree, but I worked the ropes against the bark until they frayed enough to break." Pride flashed in Ryder's eyes. "Hollister underestimated you. Again." "He said I was bait," Nora told him, "and insurance, that he had a buyer for me in Mexico." Ryder's expression darkened. "He's involved in more than just robbery and murder. There's a network: women, liquor, guns. That's why he's protected by powerful people. He's useful to them." "Is that what you've been gathering evidence about?" He nodded. "That's why he wants me dead. Not just for personal reasons, but because I know too much." "And now I do too," Nora realized. "Yes." Ryder tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "Which means we need to move on soon. Maria's risking a lot by sheltering us." "You're in no condition to travel," Nora protested. Before Ryder could argue, Maria entered with a tray of food, simple fare, but the smell made Nora realize how hungry she was. "Good, you're awake," Maria said, setting the tray down. "And arguing already. A good sign." She checked Ryder's wound, nodding with satisfaction at what she found. "The infection is retreating, but you need rest and food before you even think about getting out of that bed." "Hollister," Ryder began, "has men in town," Maria interrupted. "Two arrived this morning asking questions." She gave Ryder a stern look. "But they don't know about me or this place. You're safe for now." After she left, Nora helped Ryder eat, noting how the simple act drained his limited strength. "You should sleep," she said when he'd finished. "Regain your strength." "What about you?" he asked, eyes already growing heavy. "When did you last rest properly?" "I'll be fine," she assured him. "I'm not the one who was shot." Ryder reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "Thank you," he said softly, "for coming back, for not giving up on me." Nora squeezed his hand gently. "I couldn't leave you there, not without knowing." His eyes searched hers, something unspoken passing between them. Then, succumbing to exhaustion, he slept. For 2 days, Ryder recovered under Maria's care and Nora's watchful eye. The color returned to his face, his strength gradually rebuilding. By the 3rd day, he was insisting on getting up, pacing the small apartment despite their protests. "We've stayed too long already," he argued. "Hollister's men are still in town. If they find us here, Maria will pay the price." "Where will we go?" Nora asked. "Back to the mountains." Ryder shook his head. "Too obvious, and winter's coming. That cabin's not supplied for months of hiding out." He hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about Colorado, my parents' ranch." The suggestion surprised Nora. Wouldn't that be the first place Hollister would look? Maybe. "But it's also the one place we'd have support people I trust with my life." Ryder ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Nora had come to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. I've kept my family out of this for 3 years to protect them. But now you need their help, Nora finished for him. For both of us. He looked at her, vulnerability clear in his eyes. I can't ask you to come with me. My fight with Hollister has already cost you too much. Once we're clear of New Mexico, you could head east, start fresh somewhere. The thought of parting from Ryder sent an unexpected pain through Nora's chest. Over the past weeks, through danger and hardship, he had become more important to her than she'd realized. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. For me to go? Ryder stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. What I want, he said, voice low and intense, is for you to be safe, happy. He paused, then added, almost reluctantly, but the thought of you leaving hurts more than this bullet wound. Her heart stuttered at the raw honesty in his words. Before she could respond, Maria burst into the room, her face tight with alarm. Hollister himself is in town, she said without preamble, with 4 men. They're searching buildings starting at the other end of town. How long do we have? Ryder asked, instantly alert. An hour. Maybe less. Maria moved to a trunk in the corner and pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. I've prepared for this. Fresh supplies, ammunition for your revolver. Ryder looked at Nora. Decision time, schoolmarm, East or Colorado? In that moment, Nora knew her choice had already been made, perhaps from the moment he had cut her bonds and said, "Run with me." Whatever lay ahead, danger, uncertainty, even heartbreak, she would face it with Ryder Sullivan. Colorado, she said firmly. The relief in his eyes was answer enough. They prepared quickly, gathering the few possessions they had and the supplies Maria provided. The woman also gave them a map, marking a route that would keep them away from main trails. The telegraph line runs alongside much of this trail, she explained. If you need to send a message to your family, there are operators who owe me favors. She embraced Nora warmly, then turned to Ryder. Take care of each other, she said, kissing his cheek. And when this is over, come back and tell me the happy ending. They slipped out the back way as the sun was setting, mounting their horses in the gathering dusk. The journey ahead was long and perilous, nearly 300 miles through rough country, with Hollister's men likely in pursuit. But as they rode north, side by side, Nora felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The journey to Colorado proved every bit as challenging as Ryder had anticipated. They traveled by night when possible, avoiding settlements and keeping to the route Maria had marked. During the day, they rested in hidden places, caves, abandoned shacks, once even in the ruins of an old mission. Ryder's shoulder healed slowly but steadily. Nora changed his bandages daily, pleased to see the angry redness fading from the wound. The intimacy of these moments, her fingers gentle on his skin, his eyes watching her face, created a silent understanding between them that went beyond words. 10 days into their journey, they stopped at a small trading post run by an elderly couple who asked no questions but offered a hot meal and a place to sleep in their barn. That night, sitting on a bale of hay, Ryder finally approached a subject they'd both been avoiding. When this is over, he said, what then? Nora looked up from mending a tear in her dress. I haven't thought that far ahead. Yes, you have, Ryder said with a small smile. You think about everything. She set her sewing aside. I suppose I've been considering options. I could still teach, perhaps in a town near your parents' ranch. Is that what you want, to stay in Colorado? What I want, Nora said carefully, is to be where I can make a difference, where I'm needed. She met his gaze steadily, and where the people I care about are. Ryder moved to sit beside her on the hay bale, close enough that their shoulders touched. When I found you in that barn, I thought I was saving you, but these past weeks... He hesitated, searching for words. I think maybe you were saving me too. From Hollister, Nora asked. From myself. From what I was becoming. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. For 3 years, vengeance was all I had. It hollowed me out like I told you before, but being with you, it's filled those empty places again. Nora's heart raced at his words. Ryder, let me finish, he said gently. I'm not good at this, at saying what I feel, but I need you to know. He took a deep breath. I love you, Nora Lewis. I think I started falling the moment you looked at me in that barn, scared but so damn brave. Joy bloomed in Nora's chest, spreading warmth to every part of her. I love you too, she whispered. I think I knew it when I thought I'd lost you at the cabin, when I realized a world without you in it was unbearable. Ryder's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his blue eyes searching hers. I can't offer you much, not yet, but when Hollister's dealt with, I want to build something, a life. With you, if you'll have me. In answer, Nora leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened into something more intense. Ryder's arms went around her, pulling her closer, mindful of his injured shoulder but unwilling to let her go. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ryder pressed his forehead to hers. Is that a yes, schoolmarm? Nora laughed, joy bubbling up irrepressibly. Yes, Cowboy. That's definitely a yes. They reached the Colorado border 3 days later, the terrain changing from desert to rolling foothills covered with pine and aspen. The air grew cooler, the nights crisp with the promise of autumn. Ryder grew more relaxed as they traveled north, as if crossing into Colorado had lifted some of the weight from his shoulders. He pointed out landmarks to Nora, told stories about his childhood exploring these hills with his brother. Pa's ranch is about 2 days' ride from here, he said as they made camp beside a clear mountain stream. Good grazing land, plenty of water. He started with just 20 acres and a few head of cattle, built it up to over 500 acres now. You're proud of him, Nora observed, smiling at the enthusiasm in his voice. I am. He came from nothing, worked harder than any man I've ever known. Ryder paused, adding more wood to their small fire. I used to think I'd follow in his footsteps, have a spread of my own someday. You still could, Nora said, after Hollister. Ryder looked at her across the fire, his expression thoughtful. Maybe. Would you like that life? It's not easy, especially for women. I've never shied away from hard work. Nora considered the idea, finding it appealing. A home of our own, land to work together. It sounds wonderful. It would be, Ryder agreed softly. With you. They rode out at dawn, pushing the horses a bit harder now that they were in friendlier territory. By nightfall, they had reached a small town called Pine Creek, the last settlement before Ryder's parents' ranch. We should stop for supplies, Ryder suggested. And perhaps send word ahead to my folks. Don't want to show up on their doorstep unannounced after 3 years. The town was quiet, a typical frontier settlement with a general store, saloon, small church, and scattered houses. They bought supplies at the general store, where Ryder also inquired about sending a telegram. Office is closed for the night, the storekeeper informed them. But it'll open at 8 tomorrow. They took a room at the town's only boarding house, a modest place run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher, who clucked disapprovingly at their unmarried state, but was won over by Ryder's charm, and the story they provided that they were brother and sister traveling to visit family. For the first time in weeks, they enjoyed the luxury of a proper bed, a hot bath, and a meal they hadn't had to cook themselves. The normalcy of it was almost disorienting after so long on the run. Strange, isn't it? Nora said as they sat in the boarding house parlor after dinner. To be around people, to not be looking over our shoulders constantly. Enjoy it while it lasts, Ryder replied, his voice pitched low so only she could hear. Hollister's not the type to give up easily. The reminder sobered Nora. Do you think he followed us to Colorado? If not him, then his men. He wants me dead and you. Ryder's jaw tightened. He's invested too much to let either of us go. Then we'll need to be ready when he comes, Nora said simply. Ryder looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. That's what worries me. You're not one to run and hide, are you? I learned from the best, she replied with a small smile. A very stubborn cowboy who wouldn't give up on justice. Next morning they sent a telegram to Ryder's parents, keeping it deliberately vague. Coming home. Arrive tomorrow. Have guest. All well. Ryder. They left Pine Creek by mid-morning, following a winding trail through pine forests and meadows bursting with late summer wildflowers. As they rode, Ryder pointed out familiar landmarks from his youth, the creek where he'd caught his first trout, the hill where he and Daniel had built a fort, the meadow where wild horses sometimes gathered. By late afternoon, they crested a ridge, and Ryder reined Phantom to a stop. Below them stretched a beautiful valley, bisected by a winding river. Nestled against the foothills was a sprawling ranch, a large log house, a barn, corrals, and outbuildings, surrounded by rich pasture and dotted with cattle. Home, Ryder said softly, emotion roughening his voice. They rode down into the valley, Ryder growing visibly tenser as they approached. It had been 3 years since he'd seen his family, 3 years focused solely on vengeance. Nora could only imagine the mixture of emotions he must be feeling. As they neared the ranch house, a figure emerged onto the porch, a tall, broad-shouldered man with silver-streaked dark hair. He shaded his eyes against the setting sun, watching their approach. Then, suddenly, he was striding toward them, calling out, "Ryder, my boy." Ryder dismounted quickly, moving to meet his father. The two men embraced fiercely, the older man pounding Ryder's back with joy until Ryder winced at the pressure on his healing wound. "Careful, Pa," he laughed. "I'm not quite in one piece." "James, what is it?" "Who's a woman's voice called from the porch, breaking off abruptly. Then, "Ryder, Ryder!" She flew down the steps, a small, energetic woman with Ryder's blue eyes, her brown hair streaked with gray. She threw herself into her son's arms, weeping openly. My boy," she kept saying, touching his face as if to make sure he was real. Nora watched from horseback, tears pricking her own eyes at the reunion. This was what Ryder had been protecting, this love, this family, by keeping his vendetta separate from his home. Finally, Ryder turned, extending his hand to help Nora dismount. "Ma, Pa, there's someone I want you to meet. This is Miss Nora Lewis. She's—" He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. "The woman I love," Nora finished for him, stepping forward to take his hand. "Mrs." Sullivan's eyes widened, then filled with fresh tears, happy ones this time. "Oh my," she breathed, looking between them. "Oh my goodness." Mr. Sullivan recovered first, extending a work-roughened hand to Nora. "James Sullivan, madam, and this is my wife, Margaret. Welcome to our home." "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I've heard much about you both." "More than we've heard about you, I expect," Margaret said, giving her son a look that promised a full interrogation later. "But come inside. You must be exhausted. Are you hungry? Thirsty?" As they were ushered into the house, a warm, welcoming space filled with handcrafted furniture and family mementos, a small figure appeared at the top of the stairs. "Uncle Ryder," a boy's voice asked uncertainly. Ryder looked up, his face softening. "Jamie, look at you growing like a weed." The boy, about 9 or 10, with Ryder's blue eyes and a shock of sandy hair, stared for a moment, then barreled down the stairs and launched himself into Ryder's arms. "You came back. I knew you would." His small hands clung to Ryder's shirt. "Did you get the bad men? The ones who hurt Pa and Ma?" A shadow crossed Ryder's face. "Not yet, buddy, but I will, I promise." Over a hearty dinner of beef stew, freshly baked bread, and apple pie, Ryder and Nora told their story or parts of it, carefully edited with Jamie present. They explained their flight from Hollister, the danger still pursuing them, Ryder's mission to bring the man to justice. After Jamie was sent to bed, they filled in the darker details: Nora's abduction, the plan to sell her in Mexico, the gunfight at the cabin, the network of corruption protecting Hollister. James Sullivan listened in grim silence, his weathered face hardening. When they finished, he said, "This has gone on long enough. It's time to end it once and for all." "How?" Margaret asked, worry creasing her brow. "If this man is as powerful and protected as you say." "We gather evidence," Ryder explained. "Names, dates, details of the operation. Enough that even his political friends can't protect him. Then we take it to a federal marshal, not the territorial ones he's bought off." "And if that doesn't work?" James asked, ever practical. Ryder's jaw tightened. "Then I finish what I started." Nora laid her hand over his. "We finish it together." Later that night, in the privacy of the guest room they'd been given, Margaret Sullivan being surprisingly unconcerned about propriety given the circumstances, Nora found Ryder standing by the window, staring out at the moonlit valley. "Second thoughts?" she asked quietly, moving to stand beside him. "About us?" "Never." He turned to her, drawing her into his arms. "About bringing this danger to my family's door, maybe." "They love you," Nora said. "They want to help, I know, but I left 3 years ago specifically to keep them out of this." He rested his chin on the top of her head. "If anything happened to them because of me." "Nothing will happen," Nora said firmly. "We'll be careful, smart." Ryder's lips curved in a smile she felt rather than saw. "There's that we again." "Still planning to stick around for the dangerous parts, schoolmarm?" "For all the parts," Nora replied. "The dangerous ones, the boring ones, the happy ones, all of them." Ryder's arms tightened around her. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she agreed lightly, making him chuckle. "But you're stuck with me anyway." The next weeks passed in a strange but welcome domestic rhythm. Nora was quickly absorbed into the Sullivan family, helping Margaret with household tasks and taking over Jamie's education. The boy was bright and eager to learn, reminding Nora why she'd wanted to become a teacher in the first place. Ryder, meanwhile, worked alongside his father on the ranch, his strength returning fully as his shoulder healed. At night, he compiled everything he knew about Hollister's operation into a detailed report with Nora's help. They were careful never venturing into town together, changing their routines, keeping watch for strangers. But as weeks turned into a month with no sign of Hollister or his men, they began to hope that perhaps they'd lost their pursuers after all. It was Nora who insisted they shouldn't wait for Hollister to find them. "We need to act," she said one evening as they sat with James and Margaret after Jamie was in bed. "Take the evidence to someone who can use it." "She's right," James agreed. "Sitting here waiting is just giving Hollister more time to cover his tracks." Ryder nodded slowly. "There's a federal marshal in Denver I trust, man named Harland. He's honest and has the authority to act on what we know." "Then go to him," Margaret urged. "End this so you can all live without looking over your shoulders." The decision made, Ryder and Nora prepared to leave for Denver the next day. That night, alone in their room, Ryder held Nora close, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "When this is over," he said, "I want to marry you properly. In a church with my family there." Nora lifted her head to look at him, her heart full. "Are you proposing, Mr. Sullivan?" "Trying to," he said with a crooked smile. "Not doing a very good job of it, am I?" Nora kissed him softly. "On the contrary, it's perfect because it's you asking." They left for Denver early the next morning, with promises to return as soon as possible. The journey took 2 days, the city emerging on the horizon like a mirage, so much larger and busier than Nora had imagined. "I'll take you to dinner at the Brown Palace Hotel when this is done," Ryder promised as they rode into the bustling streets. Finest establishment in the West. They found Marshal Harland at the Federal Building, a gruff, no-nonsense man with shrewd eyes and a reputation for incorruptibility. He listened to their story without interruption, then examined the evidence they'd compiled. "This is serious," he said finally. "Names of politicians, judges, businessmen involved in Hollister's network, trafficking women, guns, liquor across territorial lines, federal crimes." He looked at Ryder. "You realize what you're starting here. These are powerful men." "I realize," Ryder replied steadily, "but it's time someone stood up to them. Too many innocent people have suffered." Harland nodded, making his decision. "I'll need sworn statements from both of you. Then I'll wire Washington for authorization to make arrests. It will take time to build cases against everyone involved, but Hollister himself, we can move on him immediately." Relief washed over Nora. After so long running, hiding, fighting, they were finally taking the offensive. Justice was within reach. They spent the day giving their statements, going over details, answering Harland's questions. By evening, the marshal had what he needed. "I'll send men for Hollister tomorrow," he told them. "In the meantime, I'd suggest you two find somewhere secure to stay. Once word gets out that you've come forward, there might be those looking for revenge." Ryder had already thought of this. "We'll stay with an old friend tonight, someone Hollister doesn't know about." They left the Federal Building as dusk was falling, the streets growing quieter as businesses closed for the day. Ryder led them through the city to a modest neighborhood where his friend, a former ranger turned blacksmith, lived with his wife. They were halfway there when Nora felt Ryder tense beside her. "What is it?" she whispered. "Don't look now, but we're being followed. 2 men about half a block back." His voice was calm, but his hand moved to the revolver at his hip. Nora resisted the urge to turn around. "Hollister's men." "Probably. Keep walking normally. There's an alley ahead on the right. When I give the word, we'll duck into it and try to lose them." They continued walking, maintaining a casual pace while Ryder scanned for escape routes. Just as they reached the alley, a third man stepped out in front of them, blocking their path. "Sullivan," the man said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Fancy meeting you here." Ryder pushed Nora slightly behind him. "McCabe, still doing Hollister's dirty work, I see." The man called McCabe shrugged. "Pays well, and now it's going to pay very well indeed." His hand moved to his gun. "Nothing personal, you understand." Before he could draw, Ryder's revolver was already in his hand. "Nothing personal about this either," he said, and fired. McCabe staggered backward, clutching his chest. Behind them, the other 2 men were running forward, guns drawn. "Run!" Ryder shouted, pushing Nora toward the alley. They sprinted down the narrow passage, bullets splintering the wooden walls around them. At the end of the alley, they emerged onto another street, this one more crowded with evening pedestrians. "This way," Ryder urged, leading her through the crowd. They wove through side streets and back alleys, trying to lose their pursuers. But the men were persistent, and soon they heard shouts behind them again. "We can't outrun them forever," Nora panted as they paused in a doorway, catching their breath. "We don't have to." Ryder pointed to a building across the street, the Denver police station, just long enough to get help. They made a dash for it, aware of footsteps pounding behind them. Just as they reached the steps of the station, a shot rang out. Ryder stumbled, falling to one knee. "Ryder," Nora cried, turning to help him. "I'm fine," he grunted, though blood was seeping through his trouser leg. "Keep going." Together they staggered into the station, startling the desk sergeant who jumped to his feet at the sight of Ryder's bleeding leg. "These men are trying to kill us," Nora explained breathlessly. "We need protection. Marshal Harland at the federal building knows who we are." Within minutes, officers were deployed to search for their attackers, while a doctor was called to treat Ryder's wound. The bullet had only grazed his thigh, painful but not serious. "Lucky," the doctor commented as he bandaged it. "An inch to the right and you'd be in trouble." A messenger was sent to Marshal Harland, who arrived within the hour, his expression grim. "This confirms what we suspected," he said. "Hollister has informants in the city. Someone must have seen you at the federal building and sent word." He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Change of plan. We move on Hollister now, tonight, before he can disappear." "I'm coming with you," Ryder said, attempting to stand. "Not with that leg, you're not," Harland replied firmly. "You'd be a liability in a fight." "He's right," Nora agreed, placing a restraining hand on Ryder's arm. "Let the marshal handle this." Ryder looked ready to argue but then subsided. "Where will Hollister be?" "According to our information, he's at a place called the Silver Palace Gambling House on Blake Street. Owns part of it." Harland checked his watch. "I'm gathering a dozen men. We'll hit the place in an hour." "And us?" Nora asked. "You'll stay here under guard until it's done." The marshal's tone brooked no argument. "I'm not risking my witnesses before this case even gets to court." After Harland left, Ryder paced the small room they'd been given at the station, his limp growing less pronounced as the pain medication took effect. "This isn't right," he muttered. 3 years I've been hunting Hollister. I should be there when they take him. And if something goes wrong?" "If you're killed," Nora challenged, "what happens to your promise to Jamie, to your parents?" She took his hands, forcing him to look at her. "To me," Ryder's resistance crumbled. "You fight dirty, schoolmarm. I fight to win," she corrected with a small smile. "Something I learned from a very stubborn cowboy." Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Midnight came and went with no word from Harland. Ryder's restlessness increased, his instincts telling him something was wrong. "They should have been back by now," he said, checking the clock for the 100th time. "The Silver Palace isn't that far." Just as he was contemplating disregarding orders and going to find out for himself, the door opened. But instead of Harland, it was a young officer, his face grave. "Mr. Sullivan, Miss Lewis," he said. "Marshal Harland sent me to update you. There was a complication." "What kind of complication?" Ryder demanded. "Hollister wasn't at the Silver Palace. Seems he got word we were coming. But we did find evidence in his office there, documents that support your testimony." The officer hesitated. "And we have a location where he might have gone. A hunting lodge outside the city. The marshal's organizing a larger force to go after him at dawn." "Dawn?" Ryder's voice rose in disbelief. "That's hours away. Hollister could be halfway to Mexico by then." "The marshal's orders were clear, sir. You're to remain here under protection until Hollister is apprehended." The officer's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. "For your own safety." After the officer left, Ryder turned to Nora, determination hardening his features. "We can't wait. If Hollister escapes now, we might never get another chance." "What are you suggesting?" Nora asked, though she already knew the answer. "That we finish what we started, together." Ryder moved to the window, assessing it critically. "We can get out this way. There's a drain pipe that leads to the alley. And then, we don't even know where this hunting lodge is. I have a pretty good idea." Ryder turned to her. "Remember I told you I've been tracking Hollister for 3 years. I know most of his bolt holes. There's a place north of the city he uses sometimes, remote, defensible." Nora took a deep breath, weighing their options. Waiting seemed prudent, safe. but they'd come too far, risked too much, to let Hollister slip away now. "All right," she said finally, "but we do this carefully. No heroics." Ryder's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Says the woman who escaped Hollister twice with nothing but her wits and determination." They slipped out through the window, Ryder wincing as the exertion pulled at his injured leg. In the alley, they found shadows to conceal them as they made their way toward the livery stable where they'd left their horses. Denver was quiet at this late hour, most citizens asleep in their beds. They encountered no one as they retrieved Phantom and Sonny, then rode cautiously out of the city, heading north. The hunting lodge, according to Ryder, was about 10 miles outside Denver, nestled in a wooded area that provided both concealment and multiple escape routes. As they rode, the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon, the sky lightening from black to deepest blue. "What's the plan when we get there?" Nora asked as they followed a narrow trail through pine forest. "Reconnaissance first. See how many men he has, what we're dealing with." Ryder glanced at her. "Then we wait for Harland. We're just making sure Hollister doesn't slip away before the marshal arrives." Nora gave him a skeptical look. "That's the entire plan. We watch and wait. Unless there's an opportunity to do more." Seeing her expression, he added, "I promised no heroics, remember?" They approached the area with extreme caution, tethering their horses a safe distance away and proceeding on foot. Ryder's leg was clearly paining him, but he moved with practiced stealth through the underbrush. The hunting lodge came into view, a substantial log structure with a stone chimney, smoke curling lazily from it despite the early hour. Two men stood guard on the porch, rifles cradled in their arms. "He's here," Ryder whispered, observing through a gap in the trees. "Those are Hollister's men." They circled the property carefully, counting 4 more men patrolling the perimeter. Through a window, they glimpsed Hollister himself, pacing inside, gesturing angrily to someone out of sight. "He's planning to run," Ryder concluded, noting the packed saddlebags visible through another window. "Probably waiting for daylight, safer traveling." "Then we have maybe an hour before he leaves," Nora said. "How long until Marshal Harland arrives? If he left at dawn as planned, at least 2 hours. Ryder's jaw tightened. "We can't let Hollister get away, not now." "What do you suggest?" "There are at least 7 armed men between us and him." Ryder thought for a moment, his eyes scanning the property. "We need a diversion, something to draw most of the men away from the lodge itself." A plan began to form, dangerous, certainly, but with a chance of success. They would use fire as a diversion, setting the stable at the far end of the property alight. In the ensuing chaos, they could approach the lodge from the opposite direction. "The goal isn't to confront Hollister directly," Ryder explained, "just to keep him occupied until Harland arrives. If we can get into a position to observe without being seen, that's enough." Nora nodded, understanding the strategy but concerned about its execution. "Be careful," she said, touching his cheek. "No unnecessary risks." "Same goes for you," Ryder replied, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Stay hidden, no matter what happens." With the plan set, they separated, Ryder moving toward the stable while Nora took up a position where she could observe the lodge without being seen. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, bathing the clearing in golden light. Nora watched, heart in her throat, as Ryder crept toward the stable. He was nearly there when a shout went up from the far side of the clearing. "Ryder's coming. At least a dozen." Harland, Nora realized with a surge of hope. The marshal must have moved faster than expected. The effect on Hollister's camp was immediate. Men rushed to defensive positions, guns drawn. Through the window, Nora could see Hollister himself grabbing a rifle, barking orders to those around him. Ryder, seeing the change in situation, abandoned the diversion plan and began working his way back toward Nora's position. But he was caught in the open as Harlan's men arrived at the edge of the clearing, shouting for Hollister to surrender. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Ryder dove for cover behind a woodpile, drawing his revolver. Nora watched in horror as bullets splintered the wood around him. Across the clearing, Marshal Harlan and his deputies were exchanging fire with Hollister's men. The lawman had the advantage of numbers, gradually pushing forward toward the lodge. Seeing his position deteriorating, Hollister emerged from the lodge, using one of his own men as a shield. He was heading for the back of the property toward the very woods where Nora was hidden. She shrank deeper into the underbrush, hand on her derringer. Hollister was 20 yards away, then 15, moving quickly despite the chaos around him. A movement to her right caught Nora's attention. Ryder, working his way through the trees parallel to Hollister's path. He was trying to cut the man off before he could escape. Hollister must have sensed something, because he suddenly spun around, firing in Ryder's direction. Ryder dropped to the ground, returning fire. Both men missed in the dim light beneath the trees. "Sullivan," Hollister growled, recognition in his voice. "Should have known you'd turn up like a bad penny." "It's over, Hollister," Ryder called from his position behind a large pine. "Marshal Harlan's got your men surrounded, nowhere left to run." "There's always somewhere to run," Hollister replied, edging sideways. "And I'm not going to hang for killing your brother." "Not just for Daniel," Ryder said, keeping him talking while trying to get a clear shot. "For all of it. The women you've sold, the people you've murdered. It ends today." Hollister laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Big talk from a man hiding behind a tree. Face me like a man, Sullivan. Or are you still that scared little boy who couldn't save his brother?" The taunt hit its mark. Ryder stepped out from behind the tree, revolver raised. "I'm not scared of you, Hollister. Never was." It was the opening Hollister had been waiting for. He fired, the bullet grazing Ryder's already injured leg, sending him to one knee. Hollister advanced, gun aimed at Ryder's heart. "Any last words?" he asked with a cruel smile. "Behind you," Ryder replied calmly. Hollister laughed. "Oldest trick in the book. I'm not falling for. He's not lying," Nora said, pressing the barrel of her derringer against the back of Hollister's head. "Drop the gun or I'll use this." Hollister froze, then slowly lowered his weapon. Well, the schoolteacher. Should have known you'd be here too. You two are becoming quite the pair." "Kick the gun away," Nora instructed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Hollister complied, sending the revolver spinning across the forest floor toward Ryder, who picked it up with his free hand. "Now walk," Nora said, gesturing toward the clearing where the sounds of gunfire had diminished. Hollister took one step, then suddenly whirled, knocking the derringer from Nora's hand. Before he could grab her, Ryder fired. The bullet struck Hollister in the shoulder, spinning him around but not stopping him. With a roar of rage, Hollister charged at Ryder, who was struggling to rise with his injured leg. They collided, both men falling to the ground, wrestling for control of Ryder's revolver. Nora scrambled for her derringer, finding it among the pine needles. By the time she turned back, Hollister had gained the upper hand, pinning Ryder to the ground, hands wrapped around his throat. "Stop," Nora shouted, aiming the small gun at Hollister's back. "Let him go." Hollister ignored her, his focus entirely on choking the life from Ryder, whose struggles were weakening. Nora didn't hesitate. She fired, the small caliber bullet striking Hollister in the back. He arched in pain but didn't release his grip on Ryder. Desperate, Nora looked around for a weapon. Her eyes fell on a heavy branch, which she seized and swung with all her strength at Hollister's head. The impact knocked him sideways, finally breaking his hold on Ryder. Gasping for air, Ryder rolled away, retrieving his revolver from where it had fallen. Hollister, dazed but still dangerous, reached for a knife in his boot. "Don't," Ryder warned, the revolver steady in his hand despite his injured leg and bruised throat. For a moment it seemed Hollister would heed the warning. Then, with unexpected speed, he threw the knife. Ryder fired at the same instant. The knife sliced across Ryder's arm, drawing blood but missing anything vital. Ryder's bullet, however, found its mark, striking Hollister in the chest. The outlaw staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face, then fell heavily to the ground. Silence descended on the forest, broken only by Ryder's ragged breathing and the distant shouts of Harlan's men, mopping up the last of resistance at the lodge. Nora rushed to Ryder's side, helping him to sit up. "Are you all right?" "Been better," he rasped, touching his bruised throat. "But alive, thanks to you." He looked at Hollister's still form. "Is he?" Nora checked, then nodded grimly. "Yes, he's gone." Ryder's shoulders sagged, not in defeat but in release, as if a great weight had finally been lifted. 3 years, he murmured. 3 years hunting him, and in the end I almost wasn't the one to stop him. "Does it matter?" Nora asked gently. "He can't hurt anyone else now. Justice is served." Before Ryder could answer, Marshal Harlan and several deputies burst through the trees, guns drawn. They took in the scene: Hollister dead, Ryder injured but alive, Nora supporting him. "I thought I told you two to stay put," Harlan said, though there was more resignation than anger in his voice. "Sorry, Marshal," Ryder replied with a weak smile. "Never been good at following orders." Harlan snorted, clearly. He knelt to examine Hollister, confirming what they already knew. "Self-defense, he attacked us," Nora explained. "Tried to kill Ryder, we had no choice." The marshal nodded, accepting her account. "His men are either dead or in custody. We found evidence at the lodge ledgers, correspondence, enough to implicate half the corrupt officials in 3 territories." He stood, regarding them thoughtfully. "You two have done a service to justice today, even if your methods were unconventional." As deputies took charge of Hollister's body, Harlan helped Ryder to his feet. "Let's get you looked at. That leg needs attention, and those throat bruises don't look good." They made their way back to the lodge, now secured by lawmen. A doctor among Harlan's party tended to Ryder's injuries. The leg wound reopened in the struggle, the knife cut on his arm, the bruising on his throat. Through it all, Nora stayed by his side, refusing to leave even when the doctor suggested she rest. "I'm fine," she insisted. "I want to be here." When the doctor finished, declaring Ryder would recover fully with proper rest, Marshal Harlan approached them again. "I'll need formal statements from both of you," he said. "But that can wait until tomorrow. For now, I suggest you return to Denver and get some real rest. My men will escort you." "What happens now?" Nora asked. "With the evidence, the network Hollister was part of." "Justice," Harlan replied simply. "It may take time, but everyone involved will answer for their crimes. The women trafficked to Mexico will be sought and brought home if possible. The corrupt officials will face prosecution." Ryder nodded, satisfaction in his eyes. "Good, that's all I ever wanted." "And what about you two?" the marshal asked. "What will you do now that your 3-year quest is over, Sullivan?" Ryder looked at Nora, his blue eyes soft with a love that needed no words. "Live," he said. "Finally live." They returned to the Sullivan Ranch a week later after giving their statements and seeing the wheels of justice begin to turn. The news of Hollister's death and the breaking of his criminal network made headlines across the territories. Ryder and Nora, though not named in the papers, were hailed as heroic witnesses whose testimony had brought down a dangerous criminal enterprise. Their welcome at the ranch was joyous, James and Margaret embracing them both, Jamie running circles around them in excitement. Even more touching was the banner strung across the porch reading "Congratulations," and the makeshift altar set up in the garden. "What's all this?" Ryder asked, bemused. Margaret smiled, tears in her eyes. "Your telegram said you wanted to marry properly in front of family, so we arranged it." She squeezed Nora's hand. "If that's what you both still want." Nora looked at Ryder, her heart full to bursting. "More than anything," she said softly. And so, on a perfect autumn afternoon, with the mountains rising majestically in the background and wildflowers scattered at their feet, Nora Lewis married Ryder Sullivan. The local pastor officiated. James stood proudly as his son's best man, and Jamie served as ring bearer, beaming with importance. Margaret had somehow procured a beautiful white dress that fit Nora perfectly, and Ryder wore a new suit that made him look even more handsome than usual, despite the slight limp that might always remain from his wound. "I, Ryder James Sullivan, take thee, Nora Elizabeth Lewis, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice strong and clear. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When Nora repeated the vows, her voice trembled with emotion. "I, Nora Elizabeth Lewis, take thee, Ryder James Sullivan, to be my lawfully wedded husband." The simple gold bands they exchanged had been James and Margaret's wedding rings, offered as a gift that brought tears to both Ryder and Nora's eyes. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared. "You may kiss the bride." The kiss they shared was sweet and tender, a promise of all that was to come. Around them, their small audience applauded, Jamie letting out a whoop of delight that made everyone laugh. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful, a feast prepared by Margaret and neighboring ranch wives, music provided by local fiddlers, dancing under the stars as night fell. Through it all, Ryder hardly let go of Nora's hand, as if afraid she might disappear if he did. Later, in the privacy of the small cabin James had built for them at the edge of the ranch property, a wedding gift that had left them both speechless with gratitude, Ryder took Nora in his arms. "Happy, Mrs. Sullivan?" he asked, his blue eyes reflecting the moonlight streaming through the window. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Nora replied, reaching up to touch his face. "What about you? Do you miss the adventure, the chase?" Ryder shook his head. "What I was chasing all along was peace. Justice for Daniel, yes, but also peace for myself, for my family." He kissed her softly. "I found more than that. I found you." In the months that followed, they built a life together on the Sullivan Ranch. Ryder worked alongside his father, learning the business he'd left behind years before. Nora established a small school for neighboring children, including Jamie, whose quick mind and curiosity reminded her daily of why she loved teaching. Word of Marshal Harlan's investigation continued to reach them, arrests made, trials held, justice served. The criminal network that had protected Hollister was being dismantled piece by piece, corrupt officials replaced by honest ones, trafficked women rescued when possible. A year after their wedding, on a warm summer evening, Ryder and Nora sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. Nora's hand rested on her swollen belly, their first child due in just a few weeks. "Any regrets?" Ryder asked, his arm around her shoulders. "About how it all turned out. You could have been teaching in Santa Fe by now, living a more civilized life." Nora smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Not a single one. This is exactly where I'm meant to be." She thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that moment in a barn when a stranger cut her bonds and said, "Run with me," through danger and sacrifice, love and healing. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she left St. Louis, but it was infinitely more precious for having been fought for, earned through courage and perseverance. Besides, she added, taking Ryder's hand and placing it where their child was kicking vigorously, civilization is overrated. Our children will grow up free, wild, and love the best of both our worlds. Ryder smiled, the lines of grief and vengeance long since smoothed from his face, replaced by the marks of happiness and peace. Our children, huh? Planning more than one, are you? At least two, Nora replied with a laugh. Maybe three, a whole tribe of little Sullivans running wild on the ranch. I like the sound of that. Ryder kissed her temple gently. I love you, Nora Sullivan, more than I have words to say. I love you too, she replied simply. Always will. As darkness fell, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Colorado sky. The past was behind them, justice served, peace found. Before them stretched a future bright with promise, a family to raise, a legacy to build, a love story that had only just begun. And it had all started with 7 words that changed everything. Run with me.